Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 28, verse 20. We left off yesterday with the question, Yaakov says, if God, basically, if God fulfills his assurances for me, then I'll do this and I'll do that. So we posed the question, why does he even have to say, if God does it, then I'll do this? God's going to do it. You're fine. You're set. What's the problem? And we also pointed out that there are some differences between the language that Hashem uses and the language that Yaakov uses if these things work out. So if you look at the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Chaf, Im yeh Elokim, if God will be with me, Chalila Lomar Shaya Yaakov Mesupak Bavtachas Hashem Yisparach. Heaven forbid that Yaakov wasn't sure if God would follow through on what he assured. God already said to him, I'm with you. I'll guard you in all that you go. So what's the problem? Rather, the explanation of the matter is Yaakov had received an assurance from God regarding his physical safety. What Yaakov is asking for now is something different. Yaakov is asking for divine assistance in being protected from sin. The proof of this is God says, I'll guard you wherever you go. Yaakov Amar Ushmarani baderech hazeh asher anochi holech. God said, I'll guard you wherever you go. Yaakov said, if you guard me on this path that I go upon. He shouldn't have said this path. He should have just said, if you guard me wherever I go. Gam milas anochi miucheres legamre. Why does he have to say, and you'll guard me on all of the path that I will go? Anochi, it doesn't translate over well from English to Hebrew to English, but the Kli Yakar says anochi is really an extra word here altogether. So he says, you know what the difference is? HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar v'ashivosicho el. Sorry, keep on going. Excuse me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar v'ashivosicho el v'adama. Tola hashava v'Hashem yisparach. God said, "I'll bring you back to the land." Yaakov amar v'shavti b'shalom b'eisavi. Yaakov doesn't say God will bring me back to my father's house. Yaakov says, if I return to my father's house. Tola hashava ba'atzmo. Yaakov puts it on himself. On his own return, on his returning himself. Hashem Yisparach Amar El Adama. God talks about bringing Yaakov back to the land. Yaakov Amar Beisavi. Yaakov talks about bringing me back to my father's house. All these differences. Mikola Shinuyim Ho'elu, from all these distinctions, Nucha Limod, we can learn. Yaakov Lo Bikesh Kiyim Al Shmiras HaNefesh Min HaChet. Yaakov's request is that God should protect him from sin. Kizet Tover Hatali B'Bchiras Shel Adam. It's dependent on an individual's free will, but God can help. God can put one in situations to help them make the right decisions. God can put one in context with the right people. David davens that God should help him pass his eyes away from seeing false things. Hizkir Lashon Kol, it's a very long piece. I don't want to see all of it now. But the basic gist of the Kli Yakar, I think it should be clear, is he says that God's assurance is that God will physically protect Yaakov. Yaakov is now opening the envelope to something totally different. Yaakov is asking that God put him in the situation to do the right things spiritually, which God had not offered him. God had not assured him. And for that, he makes a vow that if God will help him, that he'll be able to return to his father's house, meaning he'll be able to stay on the path of his religious traditions, etc. Then that God will help. Then he will follow through on this vow in gratitude to God. So it's an interesting shot. There are many approaches to this question. This is just one of many. Okay. So in any event, Yaakov leaves. Yaakov goes to the area in which Lavan lives. We are on chapter 29, verse 2. Chapter 29, verse 2. Vayar vinei ve'er basoteh. He saw there was a well in the field. Vinei sham shloshad reitzon rov simaleha. There are 3 flocks in that area. Because that's where the flocks would drink from. There was this big stone on the well. Verse 3, all the flocks would gather there. The shepherds together would roll the stone off of the well, and then they would put it back. Yaakov ultimately pushes the stone off by himself. Why is this important for us to know? Why is this being shared here at all? Look at the Ramban on Pasuk Beis. So and this is the context where he's going to meet Rachel here. But why do we need this first part? Just say he was at the well and he met Rachel. The Ramban on Pasuk Beis, the Torah goes to great length in this story. To teach us the idea that those who yearn towards God will be blessed with strength. V'yiraso titein os, and those who live with reverence for him will gain strength. Yaakov had come off this journey. He was wiped out. He was tired. All these shepherds would get together to push the stone off. Yaakov was alone, and he did it on his own. So why is that? How could Yaakov, who was so beat from the travel, do something that would normally require 3 people to do? Just goes to show you that people are connected to God, gain unique strength to do what they need to do in life. So just an interesting Ramban to keep in mind. Okay, we're going to jump ahead now. Verse 15. You know what? Actually, let's. So Yaakov meets Rachel. He's taken by Rachel immediately. He realizes there's something special about Rachel. Rachel takes him to meet her father, Lavan, who, of course, is Rivka's brother. This is Yaakov's uncle. And so now in verse 14, Vayomer lo Lavan, Lavan says to Yaakov, Ach atzmiv sari ota, you are my flesh. You're my mishpacha. Vayeshev imo chodesh yamim. And he lived with him for a month. Okay, very nice. Now, verse 15. Vayomer Lavan liYaakov. Lavan said to Yaakov, Hachi achi ata v'avaratan ichinam. Because you're my brother, you'll work for me for free. Hagida li ma maskrutecha. Tell me what should be your compensation for working for me. And Yaakov says, I'll tell you what, I'll work for you for 7 years in exchange for being able to marry Rachel. That's what Yaakov says. But there's a difficult, just technical point in this pasuk in verse 15. We haven't seen that Yaakov's been working for him. It doesn't say Yaakov's been working for him. It says Yaakov lived with him for a month. And then Lavan comes and says, how could this be that you're working for me for free? I didn't know he was working for him. So it feels like we missed something in the story. So look at the Ramban. Ramban, pasuk tesvav, hachi achi ata v'avaratan chinam. Lo siper akasav shal Yaakov oved oso. The Torah doesn't say that Yaakov had worked for him. V'tochein ki me'esh amar bayash es tzon Lavan achi imo lo yatsa hatzon miyado. Ki biroso es Rachel ki roahi chom al aleha shelo tashuv liros tzon od. Vayehu roa son bi'avasa losa. If you glance back at verse 10, probably should have read this first, I apologize. Yaakov sees Rachel and he removes the stone and he gives the sheep of Lavan to drink because it bothered him. So he gives the sheep of Lavan to drink. He's going to help out Rachel because he's taken by her. So the Ramban says maybe nothing changed after that. In other words, we know that Yaakov had given Lavan's sheep to drink. We know that Yaakov liked Rachel. We know that it was Rachel's job to take care of the sheep. Perhaps it's understood that from that point on, Yaakov took care of the sheep. It's possible. It's a possibility, says the Ramban. So then Lavan says to him, gosh, you've been watching my sheep for a month already. What's going to be your compensation? Now the Ramban says, Ve'efshar od lomar ki Lavan diber ba'arma. It's also possible, and this certainly fits with our general model of our general understanding of Lavan, that Lavan spoke in a cunning kind of way. Amar lo mitchila ki atzmo v'sarahu. In the previous pasuk, Lavan says to Yaakov, "You're my mishpacha, you're my flesh." Vayachmol alav. He had compassion for him. Kasher yachmol adam al atzmo v'absaro. We have compassion for ourselves. So Yaakov, Lavan is saying that Yaakov is like an extension of himself. So he has compassion for him too, and he doesn't have to. He's not going to put him to work. He's his nephew. He's happy to have him there. Kashira, Yaakov misakev sham misparnes masher Lavan. But now, gosh, Yaakov's been there a while, and he's eating and drinking, Amar lo hachi achiata vatavdeni chinam. It shouldn't be just because you're my mishpacha that you work for me for free. Ki yodati ki me'ata tavodosi. I'm sure you're going to start working. I have no doubt you're going to start working. Ki ish musarata. You're an upstanding fellow. Velos sparnes mishel acherim. You're not going to be a moocher, I'm sure. I'm sure you're just waiting for the moment to start working. So I'm one step ahead of you. When you work, let's figure out what your compensation is going to be. And he wrote, by the way, I'm a menschlich guy too. Obviously going to be working, but I don't want you to be working for me for free. Tell me what you want and I'll be happy to pay for it. So this is like, Lavan is basically telling him, when are you going to get to work? Which, by the way, is a reasonable thing for a person to tell another person in this context. I don't think the issue is that he's saying, when are you going to get to work? But the issue is, it's like everything. Everything is curvy and not straight. Why don't you just say, Yaakov, I'd appreciate if you start helping out around the house. But he says, obviously you're about to start working. Let's figure out how much I pay you for it. Like, nothing is straight. Then it became obvious to Yaakov what Lavan's approach was. So Yaakov says, okay, I'll work for you 7 years for Rachel. It would make sense that the work would be that Yaakov would be taking care of Lavan's sheep, because that was what they would need, and that's what they would be speaking about. But that's just an interesting Ramban to keep in mind. Okay, again, it's such a long part. There's so much here, but just to highlight some points. Yaakov ends up marrying both Rachel and Leah, or Leah and Rachel. The story is famous. We're not going to go through it this week. But once they're both married to Yaakov, we have in verse 31, Vayar Hashem kisnu Leah. Hashem saw that Leah was hated. Vayiftachas Rachma, and he opened her womb. Rachel Akara, and Rachel was still barren. God saw that Leah was hated. Is that literal? Is that not literal? We're not supposed to hate people. What's that about? We will talk about this tomorrow, God willing. We discussed today the Kli Yakar, who talks about the vow that Yaakov made and how he understands the vow that Yaakov made. We spoke about the Ramban, who has a perspective as to why we have to go through the whole story of the stone and the whole description that 3 shepherds would normally push it off, and in this case only Yaakov pushed it off. And we spoke about the Ramban regarding what does Lavan mean when he says, why are you going to work for me for free, when Yaakov seems to not have worked yet. Okay.